the external elements because it had that double protection, the double layer. So this is very useful because through the Jewish law and kashrut, certain restrictions, we cannot obviously use equipment that's not kosher, but Jewish people can have hot food anywhere they go in the world. You have to know how to do it. So you double wrap the food, then it's very useful. And that's also why they manufacture something called disposable aluminum pans. They do it for Jewish people. So you have a very large pan that could serve as your outer layer. And inside that you can have those, in the store, basically saying, this is the size your wife asked you to buy. Signed for the men, to buy the wrong size. So the 9x13 is the most common size. So if you want to bake your food in the 9x13, you buy one of those giant rectangular size, the size of like a football field. And then you buy that, you put that's your outer layer. And then you put the inner 9x13 inside there. They both have a cover. That's a double covering. And you can have all your food in there. Now it's going to take a little bit longer to cook and to heat up because it's double covered, but it will heat up. And you're not going to adversely affect the kosher status of the food. So if you go to an Airbnb, you go anywhere and, it's not really practical to kasher the kitchen just for one night, don't worry. You'll have plenty of hot food. You just have to put it up an hour early. And I've done it. Okay, so let's look at that inside. But now we're talking about an actual kosher kitchen. The best way possible. Someone only has one oven. They have to use it both for dairy and for meat. To designate the oven to be either meat or dairy, to decide which particular function am I going to use it for more often. So if I'm in a house, if I don't have any dairy in my kitchen, it makes it easier. So now it's an all meat oven, all par or meat. But if I do use a little bit of dairy, but it's only a little bit, I'll make the oven meat. And then when I have to bake dairy, I'm going to make sure to double cover it. You're going to choose the type of food that you cook in the oven or you bake in the oven the most times, most often. Which status is it? So in my example, we said that meat is going to be the most often. If we decide, for example, that the oven's going to be meat, the ones allowed to then cook or bake meat foods that are going to give off steam without a cover, because it's a meat oven. You can have all your meat dishes cooked in there without cover, totally free. But you should not, and you may not, cook or bake or roast or whatever, any kind of dairy dishes in that oven without them being covered. Technically speaking, but don't try this at home, is that if the oven was completely clean, spotless clean, but there's no residue, there's no remnants of food and no drippings, which is really hard to say that's true, meaning you would showcase it to your mother-in-law, right? Then if the food that's dairy is completely dry, you're really not going to run into a problem, but it's very hard to say that's really going to be. Therefore, we don't advise people to do that. If somebody decided to designate the oven as a dairy oven, so that what we just said would be in the reverse, that all the dairy would then be baked open, and when you wanted to bake or roast or whatever, cook a meat dish, you have to make sure it's being done in a covered way. As long as both the meat and the dairy dishes are not being baked at the same time, and also to make sure the oven is clean rather. If you're going to use the oven one after the other for meat or for dairy, it's a good idea. It's a piece of advice to put a thick piece of aluminum under the pan that you're baking on. So in case there's a little spillage, the aluminum foil will then catch the spillage and prevent it from actually getting into the oven itself. And then you're throwing away the aluminum afterwards. Just 1 second. That would be an easy way to keep the oven clean and to be able to throw away the aluminum that got dirty. Yes. Interesting. It's interesting you're asking. We say double covered because if, for example, I have it only singular covered, right?
and I'm putting, let's say I have a meat oven, and I'm I'm putting in a dairy dish, covered, right? But the rack in which it's sitting on has a little bit of meat grease or something on it. Then by doing that, I'm going to have the meat grease absorb into the dairy dish, which will make it not kosher. So that's what we say it should be double covered, so that even if there's some absorption on the outer layer, the inner layer is still protected. Technically speaking, if you knew for sure that everything was 100% clean and dry, even one layer would be enough, but we don't advise that because you cannot really be sure of that. So therefore we say be double covered. How does one kasher an oven? It's also a question. By the way, most apartments, when you start out, unless one's moving into a luxurious apartment, average apartment is one stove, one oven, so you have to learn how to navigate this until you have a bigger setup. If the oven, for example, is fleshings, and now you want to be able to cook dairy in there, so leave kisa without a cover, or the happen on the reverse. We now turn the page. Sometimes you can kash the oven through cleaning it well, and wait 24 hours from the time you last used it for the opposite kind. So let's say the oven is now meat, and I want to kosherize it to use it for dairy. I clean the oven, and then I wait 24 hours, and then I can kosher it for dairy. Then you turn on the oven to the highest setting, which is usually around 500 or 550 degrees for 1 hour's time. Some people are not so sure that this is an adequate form of koshering. So people should ask the Rav. What I've been told about this particular subject is as follows. If we're koshering an oven from kosher to kosher, right? Let's say from kosher meat to kosher dairy, we do what we just said, clean it out, wait a full 24 hours where it's not being used, and then we turn it on to the highest setting for 1 hour. That's going to kosher it, can be now used for dairy. On the other hand, if I want to kosher a fleshiga oven to parv, not the dairy, but the parv, then one would do the same process, but one would not have to wait 24 hours before doing the process. So therefore, one can clean the fleshiga oven, turn it on for an hour at the highest settings, for example, like 500 degrees, 550 degrees, and then it's already kosher parv. Well, let's say, for example, you're making your delicious brownies. You want to be able to have them Shabbos morning with your coffee and milk. So then it's a fleshig oven, so you clean the oven and you turn it on for an hour at 550 degrees. Or alternatively, if you were baking sourdough bread in the Dutch oven, covered at 550 for an hour, that also counts with the oven. So you need to do what? No what? No. Yeah. Yes. So the sourdough is fired, and the sourdough is covered, so therefore it's not affected by the fleshig status of the oven, as long as the rack is clean. If you're not sure, put down some foil, and then it's also koshering the oven. Yes. So sometimes when you have a shaila, is my oven fleshigs or milchiks, or is my oven still fleshigs, right? It's fleshig oven. If you just baked hard food in there for an hour at a high temperature, you just kosher the oven if it's clean. No, the food itself is considered to be meat. You cannot eat that food itself with dairy. But the next food, ready in the kosher oven, it's different. See, that's called a halakhic hack. You have to know how to navigate. Jewish life, Jewish people are very creative. Can do almost everything, not everything, but a lot of things are really permissible in Jewish law. Just have to know how to do them. You have to know how to approach it. Like I said about the potato, right? You can have hot food anywhere. And you know the story. I'll tell you this question in a second. I was traveling in Connecticut a few years ago, and I had this little toaster with me. And after a full day on the road, I was looking forward to having some hot food in the hotel room. And I come there, and my toaster dies in the hotel room. But I wasn't worried. I just go downstairs to take my food, and I went to the front desk and said, "Excuse me, can I speak to someone from the kitchen?" And I said, "Would it be possible for me to heat up my food in the kitchen, in the oven?" I said, "Yes." So, okay, I keep kosher. I have to supervise it the whole time. No problem. They gave me a silver foil pan. They gave me foil. I double wrapped it. It's in the oven. I stood there by the door learning my Rambam, watching that no one should uncover it. And it was good. I took my hot food up to my room. So there's ways to do things. Yeah. Yeah.
If I have mixer,
A mixer.
like this, mixer like this, but for it. And I'm mixing my bread in it, but my oven is like constructed. Am I able?
I don't know what makes the mixer milchik. If the mixer doesn't get hot, it's not really milchik in the true sense of the word. No, it's not that. If it got hot with dairy, it's a different story. Then it's not proper to do that. But if it never got hot, it's not really milchik. What about a mic? Yes. Oh, good question. I didn't touch on that. Thank you. Make sure that I didn't cheat you out on the lesson. So if you're going from treif to kosher or from chametz to Pesach, that's already stricter. Then we say, really, you should self-clean the oven. If it has a self-cleaning feature, then you're in business. Wonderful. Self-cleaning means you're putting it on for like a process like 4 hours. It gets up to 900 degrees. It's mamish liban gomor, the complete fire. But if the oven does not have a self-cleaning feature, then you're going to go hungry. Not exactly, but then we say really you should torch the oven. You should take out the either get new racks, torch the cavity of the oven, which is a very risky proposition because if you torch the thermostat, time to buy a new oven. So there are ways to do this. You cover the thermostat with foil. It's something that I wouldn't advise someone to do on their own. It could be done, but it's not so simple. So if you're buying an oven, by the way, if and when you're buying a new oven for your house, this is like a long-term planning kosher hack, get one that has a self-cleaning feature. So that when you're going to kosher it for Pesach, or kosher it from treif, whatever it is, if you're renting a house, buying a house, whatever it is, then you can put on self-cleaning and then you're good to go. Yeah.
If in the oven people used to make like flakes, not together with milk, but we used to make flakes and I go to the oven like every time, like now I can go to the oven before I use the cake to use it.
If the food was kosher, yes. Yeah.
So
What?
Like not kosher meat?
Yeah, if it's non-kosher meat or not even non-kosher dairy, or if it's chametz to Pesach, we're machmer to do more. What about a microwave? It's another thing. Microwave works. It's very interesting. It works with rays. It's not. You don't actually have actual fire there. You don't have actual boiling water. So there are different opinions about contemporary halachic authorities how to approach that. So first I'm going to read it inside, then I'm going to share with you what I know about the subject. Dintana microgal, which is a microwave, Dintana gas is similar in a way to a gas oven. Wonderful. We have like an orchestra here in New York, accompanying me in the class. You can use it for meat and dairy as long as one is covered. The same thing we said about the oven, right? But a microwave is called as long as it's fully covered. Plus, as long as you have a separate tray under each one, for dairy and for meat, respectively, theoretically. What about kashmir? If you wait 24 hours, you put cups full of water into the microwave. You turn on the oven to the highest setting until it gets full of steam. Discuss with your halachic authority if that's acceptable. So what I'm saying is as follows. If a microwave became, let's say, not kosher, or you messed up, you made a mistake, you cooked the dairy food in there, it's a plastic microwave, excuse me. So then some say you can kosher a microwave by putting, let's say, if it's a decent sized microwave, the size, let's say, of this iPad or a little bit more, you put 4 cups of styrofoam or paper in water inside. You turn it on to the highest setting. It takes about 30 minutes for all the water to evaporate. Halfway through, move the cups around so all the steam is getting everywhere and not even the area under where the cups were sitting. And then it's kosher. But you should wait 24 hours before doing so. The question is, can you do the same process when you're koshering a microwave from treif to kosher? But chametz to Pesach, that's already not something that everyone agrees with. Some rabbanim on machmer and say you cannot kosher a microwave, period, from treif to kosher or from chametz to Pesach, and therefore, what I advise people is as follows: if you're talking about like a tabletop microwave, which you can buy in Best Buy for $80, It's not a tremendously expensive item. It's money, but it's not going to break the bank with those kasher from trade to kasher hummus to Pesach. If one has a built-in microwave that costs $399 million, it's expensive, whatever, it's got a thing, and that person is in a case of financial loss, they should speak with their Rav. Some Rabbanim allow it, some of them are machmir not to do it. So it depends on who's asking the question and the background. It's not impossible, but it's not something we choose to do. We can avoid it. Okay? Yeah.
So, Victor, you're saying that most Rabbanim would say that you can kosher it from flesh with milk.
Everyone says that, yes. From kosher to kosher, you could. If it became messed up, it became treif. From kosher to kosher, there's a mess up. But if you're koshering from treif mamish, from chometz to Pesach, that's where you're getting into a dispute, whether it could be kosher or not. And my wife's grandfather, Rabbi Ber Levi, held you could. But the other Rabbanim are machmir about it. Not everyone agrees with him.
That you can double wrap something and have it
Yeah.
How do you double wrap it?
Good question. It's another kosher hack, because in a microwave, it's different than an oven. You can tightly wrap something in an oven, it's not going to burst. It works differently. But in a microwave, if you tightly wrap it, it's going to burst. Then your food's going to be exposed to the element. So that's another question. So now I'm going to tell you how that works. I have to think for a second to give a good example. If you're going to buy, let's say, a prepared dinner from some of these Hamish companies, whether it's lasagna or whatever you choose, whatever you like, lasagna, big ziti, or dishes, potatoes, whatever. And it comes in a tray that's sealed once, and that tray that's sealed once goes into a slipcase box. So when you buy that product, if you take off the outer plastic film, and now you have a closed slipcase box, inside there is a tray that's covered with a plastic that will be double covered. That you can put into a microwave. It probably won't burst. Now, it's not very healthy to heat up food in plastic, but if you're, once in a while, it's probably not going to be a problem, hopefully. What I do if I'm going to a hotel, if I need to use the microwave in the hotel room, I do something a little bit different, just to make it a little bit easier. I will kosher the microwave in the hotel. Now, even though we say that we don't kosher, it's not like this whether or not you can kosher from trade, but I won't rely on the koshering with a I'll cover my food. But I just kosher the oven because in case one of the wrappings happens to burst, I'm safe that way because I already koshered it. So I do it as a safety measure. Another kosher hack. In a hotel room, most likely the microwave was not used within the last 24 hours. The reason for that is because not every hotel room is rented every night. And even if it is, most hotels have an actual like a restaurant. It's part of how they make their money. They have the restaurant, they have the bar. So a non-kosher clientele most likely are going to go downstairs and have, they're spending the money on a hotel room, they're going to go and have a dinner there. So to say that they actually use a microwave is probably less likely than they didn't use it. And therefore you can rely on the fact that it wasn't used within the last 24 hours unless you know otherwise. And that's why I'm saying I would do it in that way. I'd kosher it and still double wrap it. And if you don't have another double wrap, you could take a plastic bag, fold it over. It doesn't have to be tight. It has to be folded over where the holes are very small, so it can emit steam from the food, but not actually bring stuff back in. That's the idea.
Like you can box, then
but usually these prepared dinners are already sealed once, and then the slipcase is a double seal, it's a second seal. You don't have to add anything to it. They make them that way because they're appealing to Jewish travelers.
Make something
Trying to make your own food, so then you'll wrap it in a plastic bag, fold over the bag, and do it again in a plastic bag, fold over a plastic bag. That's double covered, yeah. Now, what about these rustic kitchens, like maybe in Bushwick or in certain hip places in New York, will hang pots over the actual stove top. They do that in restaurants also. It's more of a rustic look. It's not like the fancy balabatish look. Now that could also compose a kashrut problem, because if I have a dairy pot hanging really close to my chicken soup that's boiling, and if I have a 16-quart size chicken soup pot, right? And then I've got the dairy pot, within close range of that. So now the steam of the chicken is going to the dairy pot, going to create a kashrut problem. So just be mindful. Don't hang your pots over the stovetop. They don't belong there. They belong in the cupboard. That's it. Now, if you want to hang them over the stovetop, hang them high. I would say you should really give yourself like 3 feet of headspace. So by the time the steam reaches the pot, it's not going to be lettuce anymore. It won't be too hot to touch, and therefore won't pose a kasha problem. You still want to wipe it off, but okay, still not a great idea. But then I don't think that you'd have a problem. So Talias Kalam Yala Kiraim, the few much in its very usually monami litlis kapes mizloges the Meir Mala Kiraim. Avoid hanging stuff over the stovetop. If the steam is going to reach them, but when it is still too hot to touch. Then it's going to cause an absorption of meat and dairy, going to make it not kosher. What about the actual grates? Do the grates have to be designated for their status? Kosher par, this one's kosher dairy, or can one use them interchangeably? I can't resist. It's not a great idea, but it's not forbidden. Why is it not a problem? Not forbidden because it grates, the fire is right under there, and it kashers itself out all the time. You have the fire burning, so even if there's a little spillage, it's going to burn out. But because there might be a little spillage, we say the minig is Yisrael Kadoshim, the Jews are holy people, and they designate grates. This one's going to be for dairy, this one's going to be for meat. And the parts can be used interchangeably. Just 1 second. If you live, for example, making a shower brachas for your friend, and you have to use all the grates for meat or for dairy, so you just turn them on for 15 minutes, and they kash themselves out. That's a very easy thing to do. Which are the grates that the pots sit on. I'll take the question at the end. You don't have to designate them for meat and dairy. Meikar hadin. You can cook meat food on this particular grate, and then thereafter cook a dairy food on that grate. On the reverse, because whatever could have fallen down from the food onto the grate, we assume is already, it's burnt up, it's long gone because the fire is there raging. Yes, even if it's an electric stove, same as the stove of oils. If you see food residue there, let's say you see cottage cheese sitting on the burner, of course you should wipe it off and clean it before you're going to put your meat pot there. There are those that are machmir, stringent, to designate grates for meat and for dairy, which is proper to do. Okay? Now, what about dairy bread? There's a rabbinic prohibition against making dairy bread. Why? Because bread, there are certain exceptions. We're allowed to do it, but generally speaking, we're not allowed to do it because bread is a staple food. And it's something that we use in a meal. We eat it together with meat or dairy. And if the bread's going to be dairy, we're concerned about someone not realizing and having dairy bread at a meat meal. Because bread is a staple food you have in a meal. Gozr Chazal, this is a rabbinic prohibition. It's not written in the Torah. One's not allowed to knead dough with milk or milk ingredients because they're concerned maybe you're going to come to have that bread with meat. The same would be in the reverse. You're not allowed to knead dough with meat, fat. Maybe you're going to come to eat it with dairy. That's the way of eating, to eat meat or dairy together with bread. That's the normal way of doing things. That's what bread accompanies the meal. The rabbis were very strict on this prohibition. They said to such an extent that if you did do it, you baked bread with dairy, the bread may not be eaten, it may not be consumed. You're not even allowed to have the bread by itself. So maybe you're going to come to eat it together with meat. But that's very common. Now, there are a few scenarios situations where the rabbi said this would be a valid exception. I'm going to now give the examples. In Paskitam, if someone made a small batch of dough, a boutique batch, today we're going to have a dairy batch of bread. It's enough to finish in one day. The rabbis were not concerned you're going to come to have it together with meat. It's going to be the talk of the family that day. Today we have dairy bread, so you're going to remember, oh, today's bread is dairy. It's unique, it's sweet, whatever it is. I made some brioche rolls, for example, whatever. Even if you made more than enough for one person, but you have a household, let's say, of 5 people, and you made enough for 5 portions, that's valid. If they're going to eat that amount in one day, it's considered to be allowed because in one day you're going to remember, oh, this is dairy, it's a special day. Now, another exception, which is very interesting, I'll tell you a story about it, is in Lamed Gimel, is if you make the bread in a unique shape. My last name is Hanukkah. Let's say you decide to bake the bread like in the shape of a menorah. You make menorah bread. Very cumbersome. You have to take the strands and you got to make the 8 branches and the candelabra. And you have to have the stand. It's a ganze Sache, But you break bread like a menorah. Now, that's an unusual shape. So when you see that in the freezer or you see that on the table, oh, this is menorah bread. This is dairy. You're going to remember. Because the shape serves as a reminder. If you bake dairy bread with a unique shape, so it's going to be clearly discernible. This bread is unique. You're not going to eat it together with meat. You're allowed to have it with meat, even if you baked a large sum, a lot. In addition to that, or in the reverse, let's say it's obvious that it's meat. Let's say you have meat strips on top of it. It's a katcha bread. Katcha bread. You can have the katcha bread with meat strips on it. That's permissible because it's obviously meat. Or if you have the katcha bread with pieces, also allowed because you see the cheese. Then it's allowed. So if the cheese or the meat is discernible, it's for sure allowed. But if it's not discernible, it either has to be in a funny shape, that's not a commercial type of shape, a usual shape that you see in the stores, or it has to be enough only for one day. Is that clear? Now, let me tell you a little story. When I was like 9 years old, we had a neighbor in Boston, in Brookline, where I lived, who gave us mishleach mones, and they gave us a bread made out like in the shape of a menorah, maybe because our name is Hanukkah. I'm not sure that was the implication. It was Purim, and she wrote on a dairy. It was a dairy bread, but again, it was allowed. We put it in the freezer because the shape itself serves as a reminder. Now, another thing I want to tell you is that I go to some various kinds of bakeries. So I was in a commercial bakery that manufactured rye bread just for sandwiches. What does that mean? Think about this. When you go to the store and buy a loaf of rye bread, whether 1 pound or 2 pound, you always have the ends. The ends are not good for sandwiches because they're just the ends. And you want to have a proper sandwich, with fluffy bread in the middle, etc. So they would bake like a 3 or 4 pound loaf would be like this long. So you only have 2 ends. So there's more usage of the bread. It's better output in terms of their efficiency. But that would not be considered to be like an unusual shape because that's the way they bake it in a commercial setting. So it says in the Poskin that unusual shape has to be something that they're not doing in the stores, they're not selling. It's something that's very obvious. Oh, this is weird, this is unusual. Once everybody does it, it becomes the norm. It's not considered acceptable anymore as a hacker. What about barekas that have cheese inside them? Yes, filling. So if it has a filling, you can see it. Ugas and mulas, pedes. Or alternatively, first of all, if it's barekas and you see the cheese, it's also allowed. But if you have other things like sweets, they're allowed because they're sweet. Sweets is considered to be like a dessert item. You don't take a rugula and say, okay, I'm going to have that with my roast. You can do it. Children do all kinds of things, but it's not considered to be a societal norm. It's not, so therefore it's considered, okay, it's a dessert item, we're not worried about it. Ugas and mulas prepares, if you have something, let's say it's with fruits or whatever, it's not ordinarily eaten together with other foods. It's possible, but it's not considered societal norm. It's only eaten as to wash the food down. Let's have a bag of cookies. Let's have a pie, whatever it is, right? Sweets. Reminds me of the expression: life is short, eat dessert first. But so then you don't have to be choished to eat that with meat because it's not the derech to eat it together with meat. You have your savory, then you have your sweets. So therefore, it's allowed to have pastries that are actually baked with dairy. Now I'm going to give you a case in point. This doesn't apply to us because it's not called Yisrael, but I'm just going to explain it to you. We certify the Costco bakeries. I take care of the account. So they bake breads there, which we don't certify because they're baked in a dairy environment. The ingredients are all kosher. But they also make a lot of pastries. All the pastries we do certify. They're dairy cholesterol, not called Yisrael. But the breads, because they're baked in a dairy environment, I cannot be sure they really have no dairy in them. I can't certify them. The kosher ingredients. That's how we do it. Okay, now I can catch my breath. Any questions? Yeah.
Question about certifying cholesterol.
At the end of class, 10 minutes, okay? But this prohibition about baking a large sum of bread, like you cannot bake more than enough for your family on one day. Dairy is not allowed. That comes into play at the time of the baking. Since the bread becomes also at the time of the baking, and it doesn't have any permissibility at all. For example, you baked a lot of loaves of bread for yourself. Then you decide to give out, okay, I'm going to give out 10 loaves, one loaf to each one of my friends, to their families. It's not good because when you baked it, it was not enough for your family. It's not enough. Now, if you're doing a communal bake all together and you're all baking it and you're all going to finish your portion in one day, that would also be allowed, but it has to be done. B'shas hafiyah. That's when you have the chalois ha'isur. That's when the halacha would actually take root. If you bake bread in a normal, regular shape, it's another one. You bake bread in a regular shape, but then someone wants to butcher it, to start making, to cut it and do all kinds of crazy shapes to it. You make all kinds of changes to it. That does not fix up the bread. The remains also the Isra remains. It was at the time of the baking because it already has Shem Isra, therefore it cannot be changed. Is that clear? Yeah.
People make a bread like farming, but I like put the butter after I bake it.
Allowed. You're allowed to because you're putting the butter. Yeah, you're allowed to put butter on top of it. First of all,
on all the bread.
First of all, if you're putting the butter on top, it's allowed because you can see it's butter. But you shouldn't put like butter on the whole bread, and someone's going to make a mistake and eat it tomorrow with meat. You have to be careful about it. It's not also to put the dairy on. You just have to do it in a smart way. I once had a bakery that wanted a hechsher on a bread that was par, but they wanted to put cheese strips on top of it. It was also allowed because you can see the cheese. It's a dairy bread in a permissible way, but it's a little bit odd. Any questions? Pizza is delicious, but it's allowed because you see the cheese. No problem. Yeah.
It said that you can see the filling, but a lot of cheese wrappers you can't see anything. You just gotta get their work right.
Yeah, and it's not sweet, right?
No.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, so that's in Yisrael, they have certain shapes. They do that. They do that. Yeah. You're asking an excellent question. I have to get back to you with the answer because the question really is to frame it. The food is not sweet, so you can't say that's the hefter, and you can't actually see the cheese. But I think the reason is because you can see there's a filling inside there, and therefore you should have enough of an awareness to know what is the filling. It's not like there's no filling in there. Regular bread has no filling, so if you wouldn't suspect anything. But it's not a good enough answer. I have to get back to you. Lena, if you can remind me after class, send me a WhatsApp. I'll be able to make sure to answer. Okay, should we do a story now, or should we continue studying? Story time. Okay, we'll end story time. Well, please mark down in your notes. We're up to Halacha Lamed Vav, so that when we get to study again, I'll know where we're up to. Okay, so we are at the cusp. You're like an English professor, right? So you know, right? We're at the cusp of Chodesh Teshuvah. We're almost beginning. I think that's the right usage of the word. I graduated high school many moons ago. But anyway, it's Chodesh Cheshvan, and that's the month that my father came to meet the Rebbe for the first time in 1961. A few years ago. That would be 53 years ago. To be exact. Is that right? Did I get my math right? No, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. 63 years ago, right? Right, we're 2024 and 61, it'll be 63 years ago. Yes, that's correct. So 63 years ago, my father met the Rebbe in Parshas Lech Lecha. Actually, after Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha, they had a bunch of students come to my father's university, and then he had Yechidus with the Rebbe. And 7 students had come to the Rebbe, the Yechidus. 6 male students and 1 female, and they each had, they wrote long letters to the Rebbe. In those years, in the 60s, they had people had long Yechidus. And they wrote like 7 to 10 page, the whole life story, and asked the Rebbe for guidance, what to do. And the Rebbe gave each one of these students personalized guidance of how to lead their lives. And I don't know what the Rebbe told all the students. I know the Rebbe told one of the male students he should learn in Torah V'das, another one the Rebbe sent to Yeshiva University. And when I came to my father, the Rebbe said, Yankel Chanukah belongs in 770. So the Rebbe like saw the neshama where they all belong. Anyway, so my father was going to learn in 770. At that time, he only knew how to read Aleph, Billy knew Aleph, he didn't know anything in terms of Jewish studies. He grew up in a traditional Sephardic home, but didn't have much of an education at a bar mitzvah in a conservative temple, etc. So anyway, so he was in the middle of studying his scientific studies at the time, and the Rebbe told him to finish his semester. And the Rebbe used an expression in Yiddish, I'll say in Yiddish, I'll translate. His name is Chanukah, Heser Chanukah. The long time Chanukah said he should come study here around Chanukah time. This was a cheshbon. So my father finished his semester, and he actually came to 770 right after Chanukah on Asar B'Teves, which is 8 days after Chanukah. And that was my father's Hasidic birthday. That's when he started to learn 770. A few months later, and he stayed there for about a year and a half. And then afterwards, the Rebbe told him to go back to university, finish up his studies. My father wanted to become a Hillel rabbi. He was thinking that should be his path in life. And the Rebbe gave my father 3 reasons why he should become a scientist. One of them was that he'd be able to elevate all the years that he invested in his studies until now. Another reason the Rebbe gave was my father was a Sephardi, from Sephardic descent, and my father was an only son. The Sephardim, but the Sephardim, it's just smiling. The son is like in an exalted status. No offense to the female community, but that's just the way it works. And he was an only son, okay, and the oldest. So he had all the checks were boxed, all the boxes were checked. And my father's father couldn't go to university because my father's father, my great-grandfather, died at a very young age. He was a smoker, unfortunately, died at 34. So my grandfather supported the family, his mother and his siblings, to go to high school and work at night to support them. So his whole dream was that his only son is going to become a scientist, So in the middle of this dream, he goes and teaches Lubavitch. Didn't know what Lubavitch was, what he fell into. Didn't know what this was. So the Rebbe said to honor your parents. And the third answer was that you'll be able to do more for Judaism with 3 initials after your name. Parenthetically, by the way, my father's grandmother, meaning my father's mother, who was a widow, and she lived with her son and daughter-in-law in the house. They much honored her. She lived with them. The Rebbe came to her in a dream and said, don't worry about your grandson. You'll have a lot of nachas from him. So the Rebbe was checking all the circuits. But the Rebbe told, that was one of the reasons, to honor your parents. And so the Rebbe told my father his path in life was to become a scientist. Spread Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe also told him once by Chabringen, said L'chaim, and should spread Yiddishkeit amongst the professors, like in the halls of academia, so to speak. And my father was a very unique person. He was an incurable optimist, and he spent years tinkering with various methods to try and invent things. He had 57 patents in the field of solar energy, 56 when he was alive, and 1 published after he died. And he was an incurable optimist. He believed anything is possible, and he believed in me. That's the biggest proof, because I didn't think anything would come of me, and then he believed in me. So, and he was also very humorous. So some of his projects would take him 10 years to actually develop. So then there was the story where he came home. I'm probably on the internet. It's terrible, but he came home one day and he said to my mother, he says he wants to have a private dinner with mommy, celebrate. I knew some big breakthrough at work, so we had to scram, basically leave the kitchen. We went to the living room, put up our antennas at high mast, full mast, make sure we can listen in on everything. It wasn't terribly private, but so they took out a bottle of champagne. And my father was celebrating the fact that the project he was working on at work for the last 5 years, figured out today it's not going to work. He's celebrating Yedias Hashlila, the knowledge that this is not going to work. And he said to my mother, this is not going to work, then I know the other process is going to work. I know the clarity, I know what we have to do. So he was an incurable optimist. And the Rebbe liked that about him. He had that spark and that fire. So I'm just leaving you with an optimistic message. My father taught this to me very much, and I'm talking to myself also, please. We all struggle. That challenges are there for us to grow, to overcome, and to get stronger from. There's no problems in the world, there's challenges. And there's always a way to find something better from it, to grow from it, some redemptive quality from an experience, and look for the positive, and look forward, ahead. And anyway, that's my father's birthday is also in Cheshvan, because I'm Cheshvan when it came to the Rebbe, so all this comes, so if I shared it with you. Okay, so have a wonderful week. Mitzvah Hashem, we'll see you next week. And that's it. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We have,
That's why I'm here. I tell stories.
we had like, it's like a dairy microwave.